Hi there, man.
see you. Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Fist bump.
Yeah.
2021.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to chat to us. For those of you who are with us, GuitarJudah, welcome to another episode of Local Legends, where we have Brent Quinton.
Legend.
You better believe it. And we're going to chat to Brent a little bit of a slightly different angle from the actual guitaring side because of his studio experience. But yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself. Just a few seconds. Who's Brent?
Born and bred in Durban. Married, 2 kids. Worked in music for around 20 years by now.
Wow.
Session player, producer, engineer, whatever, composer now these days.
Wow.
I compose for a lot of corporate stuff. So
Okay.
yeah,
Fantastic. So, as much as you are a guitarist and a multi-talented musician, you seem to be more involved, as you mentioned, in producing, and you're quite a studio whiz, and you've got your whole setup here. Tell us a little bit more about what you do and what you offer, so if there are potential clients out there.
I think it's just been a progression from starting out when I was younger, recording bands and recording various things. And then I guess the market's kind of shifted. I think a lot of recording these days has moved home. Even top tier artists now are basically recording in their bedrooms and lounges. I mean, the home studio is basically the mainline studio. As a result of that, I guess the trajectory kind of changed. Instead of recording a lot of artists, I've ended up doing post-production, which is final mix and masters. And then along with that, I got into doing composition for corporate work, like TV ads and radio and whatnot.
Wow, okay.
Sound design. So I guess like anything, your trajectory changes in life.
Yes.
So I'm loving what I'm doing. It's all good.
That's very important.
You go through different stages, and I guess when I was younger, I learned a lot about music by recording other artists and working with songwriters and bands and whatnot, and that's helped me to understand music. So I kind of feel better equipped doing what I'm doing now because of the experience that I've had.
Okay, so it's given you a very well-rounded sort of look at the music in general, including with the playing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I started off as a guitar player. I kind of think of myself less as a guitar player now, as more of a just general dog's body. I mean, I'm an engineer, producer, composer. I hate using the word composer because it feels so like formal, because I don't have any formal training in music.
And you still have your hearing, so
yeah, like that's because I stopped gigging when I was young enough, for the most part. So I was playing multiple gigs a week. So yeah, I've still got pretty good hearing. Not perfect, it's all right.
But a slight reference to composers with the hearing.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
But yeah, talking about gigging, you were involved in quite a few bands back in the past, some sort of well-known Durban bands, and maybe some others that some of us don't know about. So yeah, maybe just tell us a little bit about who you've been involved with over the years.
Well, I mean, the only band I think that people may remember from the 90s was Arapaho. That was like the first real band that I was in. I was in band with mates before that and after, but I mean, that's probably the only band that a lot of people would remember. And then more recently, and by recently I mean 10 years ago, I was in a band called Seven Stone.
Okay.
And I consider those to be pretty much the 2 bands that I had a career with, that actually recorded albums and whatnot. Seven Stone was probably early 2000s, something like that. So that's almost 20 years ago by now, isn't it?
Wow, time does fly.
A while back. Yeah, it was a good few years. I think the last gig that we played was that Coca-Cola collab in Durban with Metallica and Collective Soul and the
what
rest.
A concert, eh?
Yeah. Going back away though.
Yeah, but it must be nice to be on stage with the likes of those kind of groups, being on the same stage in the same day.
Yeah, surreal moment, I guess, being on the same stage as Metallica, like a group that I grew up listening to and, admiring. So, yeah.
Geez, so how did it all start, though, from when you decided to pick up the guitar to where you are here sitting in front of a studio desk?
I come from a kind of musical family. My mom was a music teacher. She learned how to play piano when she was a child as well. School teacher. And my dad played in a military band. He played clarinet in a military band for a long time. So I think I was always exposed to music. I grew up listening to, by default, listening to whatever and attending my dad's like military parades and whatnot. So I think I've always had like a musical awareness, I think. And I think what happens from generation to generation, like an aptitude and like a gifting for something increases, you know what I mean? So I think that I was gifted with that. And I'd always been fascinated by it, but my parents, I think, because of their background, they never wanted me to be pushed into it. You know? They didn't force me to go to lessons or whatever. And I think I kind of started quite late for a lot of musicians. I probably only started playing when I was, I think, about 16.
Okay.
A lot of kids start to play when they're like 7 or 6 or whatever. So it was a bit of a delayed start, but yeah, I mean,
you caught up.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it only takes you a few years to learn. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, from our chats over the past few months, I mean, you definitely have a nice philosophy, I think, a rounded philosophy about music and playing, and it's about the person and the people and serving and your passion for the instrument. So maybe just a little bit about that, you know.
I think, look, I've worked in music, so it can end up getting a bit blurry, like what music actually represents. But I think if you can always try and remember, and I try and remind myself of this, especially when I'm working with younger players, is that music is like this amazing, like transcendent, I don't know what the right word is, medium where, you know, it seems to convey much more than meets the eye or meets the ear in this case. And, you know, appreciating that, I think, you know, is always just remembering like how mysterious music was initially. I remember from a very young age, actually, listening to recorded music and hearing something and thinking, I would have done that differently. You know what I mean? Which is quite pretentious, I think, for a young person. But I think I always had a sort of aptitude to hearing music and trying to understand the mechanics. I think I'm a very analytical personality. So I think a lot of the time I came from trying to understand the mechanics of music and why things were the way they were. And then as a result of that, thinking maybe I'd do something different if I had the opportunity. You know? So, you know, in hindsight now, when I think back on it, it seems like I was kind of destined to land up messing with the mechanics of music anyway.
Exactly.
You know? I didn't just kind of simply accept it for what it was and kind of carry on. I'm like that with movies for the most part. I've never ever aspired to be like a director or an editor or whatever. I love movies, but I just accept them for what they are. I never, you know, criticize the plot or whatever. So, you know.
But when it comes to music, different story.
Yeah, it's different, So I kind of feel like I'm in the right place,
And focusing more on the actual craft of playing guitar, you know, I know you also have an approach to sort of how you get to be as skilled as you are, and it's not just about doing the mechanics of things, but also a mindset of approaching something, whether you think this is too fast or too skillful for me to do, you know, like what would you say to people who think I can't learn that, you know, what would your approach be?
Well, your brain is slower than your hands, right? If you watch any of those crazy speed guitar players like Ingve Malmsteen,
brain is slower than your hands.
Your muscles are faster than your brain. You can't think that fast.
Oh wow, okay.
So those guys play.
Just making sure I heard that right.
Yeah, no, of course. If you ever watch those like crazy fast guitar players, they're playing so many notes that you know you can't think to play that fast. But like repetition, if you repeat something enough times, then eventually what happens is your hands will like follow a pattern. You know, so I think people have shown that it is possible to force your hands to do something if you do it over and over and over again. I mean, I kind of had aspirations, I think, of when I was younger of being a faster player. I didn't put in the time, you know, learning how to play these sweep picking arpeggios and whatever. You can do it, but you have to spend hours and hours and hours and hours repeating the same thing over and over again. So I think it kind of depends on what you want. I think it's impressive to watch guys playing a million notes a second. It's not necessary. I think as I got older, actually, I didn't aspire to that as much as I did when I was younger. I think as I got older, I started to care more about like the sound than I cared about the actual.
That one note sounds really good, then
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of players have done that. I mean, B.B. King's probably the one guy that comes to mind. He can do that. He does like one note. He'll just play the one.
Yeah.
And he'll worry about how that one note sounds, in context. But other than that, it's like, he's not cared about how fast it is. I mean, that's not a great representation, but anyway.
Yeah, no, we get the exact what you mean. But sort of moving along from that, there must be what I would call your one favorite hated exercise. So as guitarists, I know for myself as well, there's some exercises that you don't enjoy doing, but they've got great purchase in terms of the benefit that you're going to get. Or maybe there's a few, that you do regularly to keep yourself in shape, to keep your fingers communicating, especially in a generation where everything is instant. Yeah, 2-minute noodles. Click on Netflix. You can watch what you want. You can order whatever you want from anywhere in the world from your couch. But a craft like this takes years and hours and really, putting in the effort. So maybe there's something you can show the guys, something that you do to keep yourself sharp.
Look, I'm probably like a bad candidate when it comes to technique. I don't think that I'm a very technical player. But I think something that's unique to, maybe it's not unique, but something about guitar which is tricky is that every time you create a note, you're actually using both of your hands. Not exclusively, but generally. So if you play a single note, it's a dual motion of what you're doing with this hand and what you're doing with this hand simultaneously. So doing any exercise where you're forcing yourself to play those notes simultaneously is good for that. The only exercise that I ever did to any length of time, I guess I still do it from time to time just to try and keep my fingers in shape, is that, and then you can do them all downstrokes, all upstrokes, alternating, whatever. And then there's the one where you skip up a fret every time, etc. And then you do it in reverse. Other than that, I mean, it's as technical as I ever got.
Okay, and then the rest was just playing through songs and creating your own music at the same time.
Yeah, I think that, like, funny enough, a lot of really iconic bands, U2 is probably the first example that comes to mind. They kind of joke about it now that they couldn't play anybody else's songs, so they learned how to play their own because they weren't skilled enough to learn anybody else's parts. And I think some guitar players end up doing that. They just play music and they try to figure out what sounds good, and they never try to learn anybody else's parts. I mean, I was the almost antithesis of that. I mean, when I was learning how to play music, I was always trying to play other people's parts. You know what I mean? So it was like trying to listen to something. I think the good thing about that is it trains your ear while you're training your hands. I think that we all have certain things that come easy to us, like the way that we play, and other things that are a lot more challenging. So when you're trying to learn how to play somebody else's stuff, I think it stretches your own kind of ability that you would naturally gravitate towards, especially like little things like working out where on the fretboard somebody plays something, right? Because something that is unique to the guitar is you can play the same note in multiple places, right? So it's the same note, but you don't know, and a little lick. Same lick. But it does sound slightly different.
To a trained ear, you would hear the difference.
And sometimes you don't know, especially when I was growing up playing music in the 90s. I mean, the internet wasn't like what it is now. So you couldn't just go and YouTube, how do I play this lick? You'd end up like sitting and listening to it and then trying to figure out.
Rewinding the actual cassette. And
and a little thing like, there's that lick from Paradise City. Right? It's the same place, but it sounds different. And I eventually figured out he played it there. So figuring out those kind of things by by listening and then figuring out the mechanics. That's pretty much how I learned how to play. It wasn't by lessons or whatever.
Okay.
Never went to lessons.
Wow, eh? So it is possible, guys.
Should have gone to lessons.
Or shouldn't. So the next thing I want to talk about, and this is a topic that we could speak for days, and it's an endless topic, is tone secrets. I mean, every guitarist is chasing the perfect tone, and I know you have a philosophy that you're always going to sound like you no matter what the gear, and I think we heard Tom Morello say recently that the gear doesn't matter, although he kind of said it after he got the tone he wants, but
it's true that
but
he marked the amp, so he
but also there was merit in what he said. Use what you have, and he started sort of focusing on creating music from what he had in terms of instead of just chasing tone. But maybe you can shed some light on, I mean, I know you're using Profiler here, you've got pedals. To the everyday guitarist, how would you sort of advise to chase tone or to just be happy with what you got?
I think part of the appeal as a guitar player, a part of what keeps people interested in what they're doing is changing things up every now and again. I think that's one of the reasons pedals are so popular is because you can have a guitar and an amp and a pedal board. And that's kind of the core of what guitar's been since the 90s maybe, or the 80s. And if you want to change something up, you can change out the pickups or you can change out the pedals, whatever, just kind of keep things interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the journey and it getting something new and whatever. I mean, it's all part of it, right? So discovering new sounds and using something you wouldn't otherwise. It's all healthy. I think it's all like being able to reinvent something that you're doing. But maybe there are different schools of thought with that. I mean, some guitar players are way more concerned about what they're playing. I think if you look at it in a more classical sense, like jazz players aren't as obsessed, and maybe they are, I don't know, I'm not a jazz player, but I would assume that they're much more obsessed with the notes and the chords they're playing than the sound that they've got. Whereas I think if you look on the opposite extreme, kind of rock guys are probably a lot more obsessed with the tone that they have than the notes that they play. Right? It's a bit more of a generic genre. I guess it's more about how it sounds. So I don't know. I think you have to find whatever works for you. I've ended up, for a couple of reasons, the last few years, been using a profiler, and I have my own amps profiled as well as third parties. And the thing is that in terms of flexibility, I think if you can't sound right with a Kemper, I mean, that's not on the Kemper, that's really on you. But in addition to that, I mean, almost any sound imaginable is available, and you can also switch it up. There's virtual stomp boxes and post effects and reverbs and whatever. So I think it strikes a really good balance between being able to change things up and keep things interesting. I mean, if I really want, I can go and find new profiles and I can buy new things or try to crazy effects that I otherwise wouldn't use because they exist in a virtual library of things.
Okay.
So that's all good, but in terms of like some kind of tone secret, I think that where it can become misguided is that not using the tool the right way, like trying to, how's that proverb go, trying to use a screwdriver to hammer nails or whatever.
Yeah.
I think really knowing how to use any equipment is like the starting point, right?
Yeah.
Saying that I fundamentally need something to sound good is a bit of a misguided process.
Yeah.
I think that both ends of the argument are true. It's like, does the gear matter? Of course it matters. Does it matter? Of course it doesn't matter. Because certain guitar players just have a thing about how they can get sound, tone, if you want to call it that, out of pretty much anything, the way that you perform.
Yeah.
And people will sound like this. I'll sound like myself no matter what guitar, no matter what amp that I play, right? Maybe better or worse versions of myself, but I'll always sound like myself.
Yeah.
It's not as if I'm going to get some amp or some pedal or some guitar or whatever.
It's magical.
And I'm somehow going to sound amazing.
Yeah.
Because really the way that you generate sound is in your hands. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like even the way that you hold a chord. If I held that same chord a different way, just by using your fingers differently. That's all part of how someone sounds, right? And I mean, even the way that you attack the strings, like that just will sound a certain way. If I'd played that, it would sound different if somebody else played that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really about manipulating what you have, and figuring out how you get to sound like, not necessarily you, but how you can achieve a sound. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's the way that
You see,
play.
we just scratched the surface, and we spent quite a few minutes on that. So it's a.
Sorry,
but I think
boring.
no, that's brilliant. But I think the takeaway here is learn the best you can about what you have, and if you have the opportunity to build your equipment, then do that as well. But yeah, it's up to you to sound like you.
Yeah, or it's figure out how to sound like anyone with whatever you have. You know what I mean?
There you go.
I think that's more important than pretending you can't sound like somebody because you don't have their guitar or their amp. Or,
I mean, Van Halen was a good example. He had a sound in his head, and he made sure it happened with what he had.
Yeah, and I mean, he just kept at it until he was happy with whatever. He swapped out necks and pickups, and built that Frankenstein of a guitar. Because that's kind of what this is, to be honest. I had this idea of, well, how do I build something which kind of meets the standard that I want. If I was going to I want to say desert island, but that's a bit dramatic. It's more like if I wanted to play a gig and I could only take one guitar, how could I build a guitar
with enough flexibility?
Yeah, and that's pretty much what this became. This started off as a regular telly. Because I think, again, if I was to choose any guitar, you can throw it down a flight of stairs, it's going to survive. Telly is probably the one. Something I don't like particularly about a stock telly is it doesn't have any of these naff comfort contours, right?
Strat-like contours.
Yeah,
there.
so when you sit with it kind of digs in your ribs a bit, and it can't, whatever. So I got a mate of mine to strip this all down, and he contoured the body.
Very nice.
Like this.
You even see the grains of wood.
Yeah, it happened to look pretty good underneath the finish, and that's what it is. And put a humbucker in the bridge, put a mini humbucker in the neck, because I'm not a massive fan of that
lipstick. Okay.
pickup, yeah. And then I wanted to have a middle pickup so that I could get those kind of stratty sort of things. So that sounds close enough to a telly-ish, but because of the humbucker, it's a bit warmer sounding, I guess. And then I wanted this kind of spanky sound that you get, which is it's kind of stratty, I guess. And then the thing I do like about the telly is the single in the bridge. And although it's not exactly the same, this is the tapped version of that, so it's only listening to this coil. So it sounds kind of spanky. And then if I wanted the full humbucker. So it's pretty versatile, And I wired the switch so I could get the coil tapping and whatever. I wanted to go into all the boring details of
knobs
that.
And pushes and pulls.
Yeah, I didn't want it to have a million switches, and I wanted it to be fairly conventional. So it's just got a regular 5-way sort of thing, and you get the sort of blends of whatever. So
Awesome.
So yeah, I can pretty much take this to a gig and I think have
You've got almost any option.
Generally, most of the ground covered. I don't feel like I'm outgunned,
Yeah.
But that being said, it's not 100% of any of those, but it's certainly like 85%, which is good enough for me. Especially in the mix, no one's going to care.
Well, you've got enough options when you actually do want to choose, and you are able to.
Yeah, I do have. I guess if you want to call it.
If you can't see them, there's a few guitars behind me.
The usual suspects: Les Paul, Strats, Telly, sort of. Yeah, no, fair enough. If I do need the actual real deal, then I do have it. So whatever.
Ah, fantastic. Well, this brings us to our next segment, which we call improv. All musicians have to think on the spot at some point in their lives, whether it's on stage or in front of people. So,
some of them think.
We do sometimes. Well, I do. I don't know about you, but So just a few quick fire questions, to learn a little bit more about you and what you do.